Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for one of my favorite videos every set release, and that is Top 10 Commander Cards. This time from Kaldheim with, of course, Tomer, who you can see waving in the background since we're like professional YouTubers now and we have like face caps. How's it going, Tomer?
When you said it's Saffron Olive, I was like, hey, Saffron Olive!
So we're talking top 10 commander cards, although this time we got a little bit of a twist. In the past, when we've done top 10 commander cards, it has been mostly Tomer's list, honestly, based on his set reviews, and then we just both talk about it. This time, we have Tomer's top 5 favorite cards for Commander from Kaldheim, and also my top 5, put them together, that equals 10, so we're gonna count down each of our top 5s together. So Tomer, I think I'm gonna stop asking this question. It's a tradition though. How good of a set is Kaldheim for Commander?
I feel like they've dropped any pretense of like standard sets being standard only. Like, this is a really good set for Commander, and that's not a surprise. Every single standard set, for like years now has been good for Commander. The amount of legendaries that we have for new Commander options is really, really high. However, I will say that this set in particular has me looking at a lot of the legendary creatures and thinking to myself, I'd rather have most of them in the 99 than as the leader of a deck, which I think is actually a good spot to be in, because I'm not looking at all the new cards and being like, oh my god, all of these commanders are so busted. These are going to totally obsolete previous options. It's like, no. These commanders, these legendary creatures are really cool. I really want to put them in Commander. I don't necessarily want to just like obsolete previous versions though, which I think is a really cool position to be in. And also, I'm not going to say like none of these cards are cards that I want in the commands, are in the command zone. There's a bunch that I do. And there's a lot of cool reasons to do it. But I like the fact that it feels balanced. It doesn't feel like the power creep is just overwhelming. It feels like a balanced set with a lot of interesting stuff. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I think that is a really good way to put it. I kind of found myself in the same place. There's a lot of legends I'm excited for. Many of them I'm more like, this is going to be really sweet in the 99. And the ones I am excited about as commanders are mostly like, some of them seem really powerful, but they're mostly unique effects rather than just like strictly better versions of old cards. Things like Orvar, Tur Grid, they're exciting to me as commanders because they're doing something brand new that we haven't really seen before for the most part, rather than like, oh, this is just, an old commander. Like, we kind of saw this with Agar or whatever it is, the serpent from Zendikar Rising that was just like Tetyova, but better for the most part.
Oh, yeah, AC, the Tyrant, the Tyrant to Gyre Strait or something like that.
Yeah, Agar's the new giant uncommon, you're right. But you know what I mean, the serpent from Zendikar Rising, where it's kind of just like Tetyova, but an improved Tetyova. The cool commanders from this set, I think, are pretty unique, so I'm excited to talk about it. We got some really sweet cards on our list today, but are you ready,
and it's going to be 30 minutes. We're going to stick to 30 minutes or it's free. That's how we do it over here.
I mean, it's free anyway, but Tomer, if people want to support the free content, if people want to support this free content, what can they do?
Oh my goodness, this is a great segue. So yeah, if you're interested in supporting this free content that you're getting right now, maybe head on over to our sponsor, cardkingdom.com, that has all of these Kaldheim cards that we're going to be talking about right now. They're all in stock, I assume, because, they usually have everything in stock. Great prices, great shipping, really good customer service. And if you buy with our sponsor affiliate link, that's going to be linked in the video description, you're helping out the channel. So it's a win-win. So go check them out.
Yeah, and click the dingle dangle.
And the dingle dangle. And buy our merch. I'm going to leave a link in the merch. Apparently it's just filling up Richard's garage. Help clean Richard's garage. That's hashtag clean Richard's garage.
I'm sure Richard would appreciate it, honestly.
He just wants the stuff gone, all right?
All right, so here's how this is going to work. The way we're counting this down, we're going to have my 5th favorite card from the set, and that'll be the first one we talk about, and then it'll be Tomer's 5th favorite card, back and forth, all the way to the number 1 cards for each of us. So Tomer, are we ready for the countdown?
Let us get started with the video.
Oh, yeah, one other thing. We did have a little bit of overlap where we both had cards on our list, so we intentionally made that not happen. Like, there's certain cards that we both really like, so we replaced, one of us replaced them on the list, so we have 10 unique cards, so keep that in mind as well. But anyway, number 5 on my list, Tober, we have a pretty innocent-looking land, the World Tree. In the World Tree, I don't know, this isn't the most exciting card to talk about, but I honestly think it is one of the most important cards from the set for Commander. I think this is an auto-include in 5-color decks, first off, and then that last bit of text, which people sometimes focus on, like, oh, I'm going to get all these gods, I'm going to put a bunch of gods in my deck. I think that's a cool deck to build, but World Tree, it's perfectly fine just as mana fixing without that. I think that's its main purpose, but then you also could potentially put a bunch of gods into play, or do shenanigans with Arcane Adaptation, Maskwood Nexus to put all your creatures into play. But Tober, what do you think about the World Tree in Commander?
I mean, I totally agree with all of that. This is like, I would definitely be interested in running this in a most 5-color decks just for its mana fixing. It's essentially when you have 6 or more lands on the battlefield, it's a chromatic lantern. It turns all your lands into the perfect mana fixer to taps for any color. And that's a huge boon for 5-color decks. It does come with some drawbacks. It enters the battlefield tapped, so it's a little bit slow. It only taps for green until you have 6 or more lands, so it's not the greatest mana fixing in like a 5-color deck. But once you do hit 6 or more lands, and you're in green, so you're probably going to have a lot of land ramp options. It's really good. It's really good fixing, and that's just ignoring the activate ability. But Seth, what are you interested in with this activate ability now that it's there and available? Are you going to do anything fun with it?
Yes. We'll see how the timing goes. But one of the first decks I actually have been building and hoping to play on a future Commander Clash is a 5-color World Tree deck where it's essentially just God Tribal, where you have a whole bunch of gods and ways to tutor up World Tree and hope no one has Strip Mine, and then you just put all the gods into play, and it should be insane. And it does combo with another Kaldheim card and some old cards like Conspiracy and stuff, but there are ways to make all the creatures into your deck gods. It's some of them, especially the new one, Maskwood Nexus, which I feel is like a reasonable-ish standalone card compared to past versions, are easy enough to like slot into your deck. Maybe you tutor up with Fabricate or whatever, and then all of a sudden you just win the game, essentially. Like, if you have Maskwood Nexus and you activate the last mode on World Tree, I really don't know how you lose. You can do it on your opponent's end step. It's not even sorcery speed, so you can do it on their end step, untap, swing with everything. Or you can have, like, I Win Piles, where you have things like Terror of the Peaks, for example, that deals damage whenever a creature comes into play, and then you don't even need to attack to win. So I think the last mode is really cool. I just don't want people to get trapped on it, because I think this card is good enough to play in 5-color decks, almost all 5-color decks. At least I will play it in all 5-color decks, even if I have literally 0 gods, literally 0 synergies, just as mana fixing. Like, Chromatic Lantern is really powerful. I know it's gotten a little less popular recently as people, like, shy away from 3-mana ramp sometimes and focus on 2-mana ramp, but this is a Chromatic Lantern that's on a land, so the cost is, like, way, way lower than putting this in a ramp slot. You put this in the slot of, like, a forest and deal with the drawback of it coming into play tapped, but then you get this huge upside, and like you said, it's in green, so you're going to be cultivating, and Kadama's reaching, and playing all these explosive vegetation style effects, rampant growth style effects, so you can get to 6 lands really quickly in a green deck.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, without that last ability, which is great, it is a game ender in the right deck, but even in decks that aren't going to ever use that activated ability, it's really sweet. It's really good for gods, and I also like how you mentioned, like, Maskwood Nexus, you can turn all your creatures in your deck into gods. The thing that I'm most excited about is I have a deck Tribal, which is all about changelings, and all changelings are all creature types at all times, including gods. So if you have a deck full of changelings anyway, you can just get all those out. And even though changelings are generally like a little bit weaker because their main shtick is that they're all creatures at all times. There are some game-ending ones, like Mirror Entity, for example, allows you to pay X mana to turn all your creatures into XXs for the end of the turn. So you just like dump like say 10 mana into Mirror Entity. All your creatures are changelings. They're like 1/1s and 2/2s, but now they're 10/10s and they just win you the game. So there's a lot of ways to just win the game off that as well. So I'm very excited for this one too. This would be high on my list as well.
Kaldheim seems like a good tribal set. Maybe the best set ever for tribal, I would say. At least that's like Lorwyn or whatever.
After Lorwyn, for sure. Yeah, it's really good.
All right, let's move on to Tomer's number 5 card, which honestly was a card that was on my list as well. Orvar, the All-Forb. Tomer, in the intro you mentioned some of the legends from this set are ones you're excited for the 99, and then there's some that you're excited for as a commander. Where does Orvar fit on that scale?
Oof, this one is definitely a commander. This one goes into the command zone, so you can really utilize its abilities, in my opinion. That's where I'm at least the most excited for it. And it's also just like a lot of our picks have overlap because we do have some overlapping tastes. We like the jank, we like the gimmick style decks, you know, the ones that do something very unique. That sets it apart from other decks. Orvar is definitely like emblematic of that from the set. This is a creature that basically encourages you to run a bunch of very cheap instants and sorcery spells that target your own permanents. And when you do so, you get to make a copy of that permanent. And it can be any permanent. It could be if you target a land with Twiddle, for example. You have now a token copy of that land, which is very cool. It's like you don't really get a lot of those type of abilities ever in Magic the Gathering. So this is very unique. And the idea with Orvar, I think, is basically to just jam as many cheap, like low CMC, the cheaper the better, instant sorceries that can target your own stuff. So Twiddle, really obscure cards like Thermal Flux, which it like turns like a permanent from snow into non-snow, but it can target any permanent. So it's 1 mana and you can target anything. So the flexibility there is great. So you take a bunch of these like obscure cards that I think most people who play Commander don't even know exist because you would never in your wildest dreams run a bunch of these cards. They're suddenly all-stars in Orvar because all of them say like pay 1 mana, make a copy of any permanent you control on the battlefield, which is absolutely insane. So you can copy like a Muldrifter, draw 2 extra cards. You can copy an Archaeomancer, you know, and then get back any instant sorcery.
If it's a Muldrifter, Tomer, you have a Panharmonicon, so actually you're drawing 4 extra cards, just so that's clear, but continue.
You could also copy the Panharmonicons. Why not, right? You can make an army of Panharmonicons. I don't know is it legendary or not? I don't even know. You can get around that.
Yeah, it's not legendary, so you're good to go. Legendary? You make all the Panharmonicons and then the Muldrifter. I think this is kind of like Blue Feather. Like if you think about like how Feather plays with the cheap spells that target things, this wants a lot of the same stuff, but it expands out because you can target any permanent, as Tomer was mentioning, and one of my favorite things that Wizards does with new commander designs is prints commanders like this that makes cards that you would never play in any other deck playable. Those are the absolute best kind of new commanders Wizards makes. I think that like, this is just really rawly powerful and you play a pile of good stuff that every other deck plays. Those are kind of boring. We have lots of commanders that are like that. But when commanders like Orvar come along, that all of a sudden is making like Thermoflux and Twiddle into some of the best cards in your deck, that is what really excites me. So I think the discard mode, probably more of a constructed thing. I think that was more like to maybe give it a chance in like modern or standard. I think really you just play this and hopefully go to town with it. And I agree with you 100%. This is a card that I want in my command zone because if you're playing this, you're building your deck around that first ability on it and filling your deck with cards that work with that first ability. So I think playing in the 99, I can't actually think of an existing deck that I would want to run this in the 99 of. Like if Feather had blue mana, I probably would run it in there, but I'm not sure of another blue deck that I would run this in. But as a commander, it is super unique, super fun, and it seems like, I don't know if it's going to be super good, but the good games with this deck are going to be hilarious and really fun.
Yeah, I think the only, like, it's similar to Feather, it's similar to Zada in terms of, like, what it wants to be doing. It wants to focus on low CMC instant sorceries to target your own stuff. It does so in a very different way. There might be combos that, like, win you the game, but this seems more of, like, a dirtly, just, like, generate a ton of value with a bunch of token permanents, and use a lot of protection, use a lot of counter magic and stuff to protect your Orvar, because you do not want to be in a position where you have a handful of like thermal fluxes and stuff that are just nonsense garbage cards by themselves, and Orvar's like removed from the battlefield. You have to avoid that at all costs. And also, I think Orvar will take a couple turns to win the game. Yeah. Probably, unless there's like crazy combos, unlike Zada.
The only combos I have found require you to play Orvar in the 99. I haven't found a mono blue infinite combo, but like Invigorate is a spell that you could repeatedly target. You can cast it for forcing an opponent to gain 4 life. So you can make infinite copies of a creature by just invigorating. So there is something like Shipwreck Dowser that returns the instant or sorcery back to your hand when it comes into play. So you can kind of like make a weird Splinter Twin style combo. But of course, then you're playing Orvar in the 99, and then you run into some of those issues we were saying, where if you're building an Orvar deck, you're really going to have a lot of cards that need Orvar on the battlefield. So if you don't have enough protection, or if you're playing Orvar in the 99, you risk having a bunch of Invigorates and Thermofluxes and not having the payoff to make it work. So
there's one more cool thing about it. I know, we have to keep going, but so the artwork. I want to talk about the artwork for a second. The artwork is so cool because you see like this weird humanoid thing in a lake of tentacles, right? And it's kind of like floating on the water. But it looks very similar to the tentacles around. It's like the same, like the skin, like its hand is the same tone as the tentacles. And you're like, what is this? What is this floating thing doing in this sea of tentacles? And how is it floating? And where are its legs? Well, if you look at it, it's actually like one of the tentacles. It's a flesh puppet. It's a tentacle that took human form. So Orvar is probably not just like this little humanoid that we're seeing in this artwork. It's probably like the entire like tentacle monster, which I think is very cool and very creepy. I like it a lot.
That is super cool and super creepy. It sounds like an anime thing, which I know you have a doctorate in, so I'm not surprised that that's where you're I
was going to go for like Lovecraftian horror, but okay, anime thing. Leave a comment below what anime you think this Orvar character would fit in. We'll move on now.
All right, moving on to my number 4 card. We have another card that I guess is a little bit spiky, maybe a little bit boring even, but I feel like this is a card that is going to be a new staple in certain colors, which is Tabal's Trickery, a red counter spell. We've seen some like jank decks in Standard and Modern built around countering your own spells to try to put something big into play, and while theoretically you could do that in Commander, in a 100-card singleton format, it's going to be really tough to build your deck around countering your own stuff and getting something big. On the other hand, I think Chaos Warp is like a top 3 or maybe even like number 1 red card in the entire Commander format. If you look on like EDH Rec, it's just one of the best removal spells in the format because it lets your mono red deck or your Rakdos deck deal with things that it normally wouldn't be able to deal with. I feel like Tabal's Trickery is going to have that same trajectory where, yes, if you're playing a blue deck and you already have access to real counter spells, then you're not going to want this. But if you're like a red deck or a Rakdos deck or some color combination that has difficulty dealing with certain permanent types, I feel like this is just like an auto include in those decks. What do you think, Tomer? Is comparing it to Chaos Warp too ambitious, or do you think this can develop into a Chaos Warpian staple for mono red?
So I'm a little bit more skeptical on Trickery in terms of most Commander decks playing it, because I think the difference between Chaos Warp and Tabal's Trickery is that Chaos Warp can deal with stuff after it's on the battlefield, so you don't necessarily need to have your mana up immediately for it. And it also allows red to deal with like enchantments, which they normally couldn't. And, you know, actually their creature removal is kind of bad too overall. So it could deal with like spot creatures as well, planeswalkers, whatever, what have you. And Trickery does require you to have the 2 mana up at all times. And we do have like other red cards that can also deal with stuff on the stack, like Reverberate and Fork and whatnot. Also 2 mana. They don't see a lot of play though. They can't counter a spell, which is which is the main difference. And it can only copy instants and sorcery. So it is different. Trickery is a more, it's a hard counter, right? It will always get rid of the spell. And I've noticed that a lot of the buzz around Trickery is actually at CDH tables where you're trying to run like a non-blue deck, and you need to have answers to like Thassa's Oracle and stuff like that. Like stuff that is about to win the game, you need it countered. And red has very limited ways of actually just like stopping spells. And this is going to be the way that you're going to do it. Maybe even like in other sort of decks too. Also using it yourself as like a polymorph effect, where like that's how standard is doing it, right? Like you copy your own cheap spell, get like a crazy big spell out of your own library. That's really cool too. I don't know if it's going to be that popular in like casual Commander. It is very interesting, and I'll be happy to be proven wrong, because I think this card is really cool. Even though it's like I'm seeing a lot of play in Standard, and people are probably already getting sick of it very quickly because it might be a little bit too good at what it does. I think it's just a really unique spell. I mean, this is a counter spell in red, which red almost never gets. All of the ones that it had previously are garbage. It has this little random element, so it's really hard for you to manipulate the top of the library and always get what you want. You have to kind of work for it. And I don't know. I like the idea of it a lot. So I hope that I see a lot of it.
I will say that we were talking about the idea of countering your own thing to put something big into play. I think it's interesting that the way they chose to do this was only your top 1, 2, or 3 spells. So in theory, you might be able to use something like Scroll Rack to stack your deck in a way where no matter how many cards get milled, you're going to get something good out of countering your own spell with Trickery. You're not going to be able to guarantee one specific card, obviously, but if you can stack, 4 good things on the top of your deck and then trigger your own thing, you're going to get one of those 4 no matter what's milled. Yeah. So, and I think you also hit on something important, which is I think it probably does get better the higher powered your games get, because this is a really good way for non-blue decks to stop game-winning combos. So if you're playing kind of a lower powered game where everyone's just kind of like on Commander Clash, where we're dirtling around and like playing creatures, I think you're right that it does lose a little bit of its appeal, although I think I'm still going to jam it in a lot of decks, at least at first, and see how it goes. But if you're playing in a meta where you have a play group that's playing a lot of combo decks, a lot of 2-card I win the game things, or 1-card I win the game things, like Thassa's Oracle can be sometimes, then this goes way, way up in value if you're in a color combination that doesn't have access to other counter spells to interact on the stack.
Yeah, it's also just a very exciting card. Like, I'm going to be excited to see what it hits every single time. And I think that's a good design to have.
Like Chaos Warp, where when you do it, there's always this tension, like, I'm going to do this, like, I know they'll probably hit a land, but they could hit something that's even better, and that creates fun moments in Commander games, I think.
It's probably going to be a downgrade, but it could be an upgrade, and that's like, that tension there is really, really neat.
Well, let's move on to Tomer's number 4 card, which we're staying in the world of red cards. Yeah. And we have another legend that is Toralf, God of Fury, and also Toralf's Hammer. Tomer, is the hammer part of the appeal of this card, or is it Toralf itself that you're excited about?
So the hammer, it has an appeal not for the power level of it. I think it's definitely the weaker end of the card, but I like the flavor of it, just like the idea of like, this is Thor's hammer, and the mechanics match the flavor in my mind of what you'd be doing with it, where like you take the equipped creature, you have it in your hand, you pay 2 mana and you throw it, unattach it from your hand, you throw it at a person's face, you lightning bolt a person's face because it hits hard. And then it comes back, it can return magically to the owner's hand. So it returns back to the owner's hand, which is really cool. And then the equipped creature gets a bonus, can only wield, you can only wield Toralf's Hammer if you're proven worthy, right? And mechanically, that's showcased by like, you get a bonus, you can properly wield the hammer as long as you're legendary. And that's like their version of being proven worthy, which I think it's just like, I like the flavor of it. It's not, I don't think the equipment's particularly that crazy good, but it is solid enough. Like, if you do need some removal or you need an equipment on the battlefield, this will do. And I mean, a lot of creatures in Commander are legendary, so that restriction is not going to be too difficult to get value out of. But Toralf, the God of Fury, the front side is where it's really exciting. And I think this card is like insane for any burn commander. Basically, you pair Toralf with a bunch of like mass damage abilities that red is known for, mostly the board wipes. So like Blasphemous Act is a cheap way to deal 13 damage to all creatures. Turns out if you do 13 damage to all creatures, probably there's going to be some excess damage, and you can take that excess damage with Torras and either, kill something that's bigger than 13 damage, but more likely you're going to just be pointing it at your opponent's faces, all that excess damage to opponent's faces, which is probably going to kill some people straight up. Or you can do it even better than Blasphemous Act. You can do Starve Extinction that does 20 damage to all creatures. Odds are you're going to have a lot of excess damage and probably going to kill opponents with that. You can even go even better, like you can go with earthquake effects and stuff like that, where it's not going to be immediately lethal, but you can control the board with a bunch of these board wipes. Give Torras a way to survive with either protection from red or indestructible, so he's not going to die to these own board wipes, and have a good old time just controlling the board, making sure your opponents can't really keep creatures on the battlefield, and all that excess damage being dealt to those creatures are going to your opponents, and you're just going to die very, very quickly off that. The other thing that I really like about Torras, and this is the most exciting thing for me, is how Torras works with damage amplifier cards. So if you take something like Furnace of Wrath, it deals double damage, and it doubles the effect each time Torras triggers. The best is a Fiery Emancipation, which triples it. So like imagine you have Torras on the battlefield, a Fiery Emancipation, and your opponent is like on tokens, right? They have a bunch of 1/1s on the battlefield. They have like 5 1/1s on the battlefield. You lightning bolt one of their 1/1s, so it deals 3 times 3 because of Fire Emancipation, 9 damage to a poor 1/1 squirrel token, right? So now it dies to 1 damage, and then there's 8 excess damage that Torras then takes and then redirects to, let's say, another 1/1. So that's 8 excess damage. Then the Fire Emancipation triples it again. So you're doing like an absurd amount of extra damage to that poor 1/1. Very quickly, you have a lethal amount of excess damage that Torras can just redirect to an opponent's face. And then boom, opponent's dead.
That's going to spiral into like hundreds and thousands of damage really quickly with something like Fire Emancipation out, which is kind of actually super hilarious. You probably just kill the table with a lightning bolt. I think the other thing I like about Torras is it's kind of like your Stuffy Dal commander. Like, yeah. I love playing like Stuffy Dal Brash Taunter decks. My only criticism would be I kind of wish it was Boros, so then you could have like Boros Reckoner and Spite-Mare and like fully embrace the like self-damage theme. But this seems like if you want to play like the Stuffy Dal, the same cards that work well with Torras, the Starve Extinctions, the Blasphemous Acts of the world, work really well with Torras. So if you want to build that play style, I think this is the new best commander for it. And like you said, there's interesting combos. It seems like a really fun commander. And another powerful but unique commander, I would say, where yes, it's definitely going to be good and people are going to build sweet decks around it, but another commander that I don't think really like invalidates a popular commander that already exists.
Yeah, and I think like you said, if you want to play a Boros burn style deck and embrace all of them, I think Torras fits perfectly in the 99 there too. And it's not necessarily that Torras as the commander invalidates those Boros strategies. I think he's good, but he's definitely still fragile. And all the cards that work well in the Boros deck that are like earthquake effects, like Fire Song and Sunspeaker, for example, are going to work really well with Torras. So he slides right into the 99, no problem as well. And I really like that. I love the marriage of like flavor on this card, like this idea of like this like lightning bolt, just like it's like a chain lightning effect, like it hits one and then bounces and hits the other one. And he's like he's the god of fury in Kaldheim, but he's like the god of lightning or whatever. And it's really cool. And the hammer is really cool. I really like it. Kaldheim is like, it's chock full of this, where it's like the flavor and the mechanics match really well. And the cards aren't so absurd where it's like, I can't enjoy the flavor, like Throne of Eldraine, cough, cough. I think it's really neat. I like it. It's really neat.
Let's move on to my number 3 card on the list, which is another god. We're staying in the realm of gods. And if you know one thing about how I enjoy playing Commander, Commander is really about a race to see who can draw the most cards. Like, the real hidden winner of most Commander games isn't who kills everyone else. It's whoever draws the most cards before they die. And Cosima, God of the Voyage, and also Omenkeel, I think, is one of the better backsides of some of the gods we've seen. But Cosima, oh my goodness. This is a card that, when I first saw it, I was like, okay, like, that's fine. That's kind of cute. But then I actually played with it a little bit in Standard, and I was like, oh my goodness, if you can get this card into exile, it is absurd. It is like one of the best card draw spells that has ever been printed. Like, there is that drawback. So the way Cosima works is, you play it, you gotta wait till your next upkeep for it to go to exile, but once it's in exile, it essentially gives you this weird landfall draw a card, except it's delayed, you store up all those counters, and then eventually you can put Cosima back into play when you make a land drop, and you draw a card for each land drop, and it gets massive as well, which is pretty exciting. And if there's one thing about Commander, people like to ramp. Like, I would imagine if you're playing something like Tetjova, really any sort of Simic style deck that's playing a bunch of land-based spells, I think this is close to an auto-include in a card draw slot, essentially, where you're getting this, essentially a Tetjova trigger, with this weird delay to it, but it's gonna come back as a really massive creature in the end, and you get this upside of the Omenkeel, which is actually a reasonably powerful vehicle. Like, only Wonder Crew, only costs 2 mana. When you hit your opponent, you can steal lands from their deck to make sure you're hitting land drops, which kind of synergizes with the front side, not so much in Commander, because you can't have 2 in your deck, but I think that the Omenkeel is a reasonable way to make sure you hit your land drops as well. I will say, I don't really like this card as a Commander, though. I feel like if you're mono blue, you don't have access to the Cultivates and the Kadama's Reaches and the Rampant Growths to get a bunch of landfall triggers, so this is one of those legends that you were talking about in the intro, where I really love it, but it's definitely a card that I'm excited to stick in the 99 rather than play as my Commander. But Tomer, I'm rambling on a bit. What do you think about Cosima?
I totally agree with you on all of that. I also like the fact that Omenkeel is blue vehicle support in blue. Like, vehicle support is usually Boros colors. At least in Kaldheim, that's how it was. We haven't really seen vehicle support outside of Kaldheim, I don't think. But this helps all vehicles in blue, which I think is a cool design space. It's obviously limited for now, but the fact that you can run extra vehicles in this deck if you have Omenkeel as, like, if you are building around Omenkeel as a commander is kind of neat. Also, I totally agree with, like, Cosima's better off, more powerful in the 99 of a Simic deck, like AC or Tetjova, for example, where green just has so many ways to land ramp so efficiently that you're just getting so much more value out of that, like, pseudo landfall ability than if Cosima was the commander. But I also still kind of like her as a commander, just because she does kind of, like, because she is it is more limited on how you can get landfall triggers in mono blue. That is kind of an interesting design space and an interesting restriction. Like, it's going to be weaker, obviously, but there are some cards that if you dig deep in blue, you can get some extra value out of them, and that makes Cosima a little bit more interesting. Like Dreamscape Artist, I remember that was a card you played recently, where you can, like, discard a card and sacrifice a lane to put 2 lands on the battlefield. It's like a hero ability in blue. So that's 2 landfall triggers for Cosima. There's, like, stuff like artifacts, obviously, like Walking Atlas and Wayfarer's Bauble. There's also one favorite of mine, Patron of the Moon, where it's a very overcosted spirit, but it has, like, an activated ability where you pay 1 and you put 2 lands from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. So again, that's another way of getting landfall triggers. Maybe it's good in Moonfolk. Maybe it's good in Moonfolk. I try it in Moonfolk. I don't know. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, I love the flavor of this card. Obviously, she's going on a voyage to distant lands, and the further away she goes, the longer away she goes, the better her rewards when she comes back home to bring all the stuff that she's brought with her. And she's on the ship, and the Omenkeel's there, and, you know, it's discovering lands by going to other places and, I guess, pillaging them. I don't know. I love it. It's Kaldheim's really cool, you guys. I love it. It's nerding out.
Last real quick thing, then we'll move on. The other thing I like about this card is, as a commander, it might be one of the few, or maybe even the only god, where I think you would play it for its backside. Like, to make that, like, mono blue vehicle deck, where sure, you can play it as Cosima, but I actually think the Omenkeel is kind of like an interesting build around commander, because it gives you this vehicle that cares about all your other vehicles. That deck probably wouldn't be very good at this point, but as we continue to get more vehicles, I don't know, like, it's kind of cool that you can have a vehicle as your commander, and that might actually be relevant at some point.
Yeah, what does mono blue vehicles even look like? That's that like excites me in terms of like a deck builder, because I have no idea. I don't even know anybody who's like talked about mono blue vehicles before. I'm sure there's probably going to be in the viewer in the descriptions right now, like having like their own cool builds, and I'm excited to see it. You know, like that's what excites me about Commander, is not like having a retread like the same deck but better commander, you know? The same deck, but better. I want to see new stuff. And like, this is definitely new stuff, right? So this is A+ for me.
Let's move on to Tomer's number 3 card. We have Magda, Brazen Outlaw. And this is a card I think maybe suffered a little bit from being one of the early spoilers from Kaldheim, and then it kind of, like, once we hit spoiler season proper, everyone was focused on, like, the new cards that were being revealed, because Magda, when it first came out from the early spoilers, I thought this was going to be, like, the best commander card from the set, and now it's, like, coming in at number 3 on our list. So, Tomer, what are we doing with Magda in the commander format?
She is so busted. She's so pushed. Like, For 2 mana, Seth. This is a 2 mana creature. Hey, you have to keep this in mind. The 2 mana is very important here. She comes with 3 abilities, and all of them are very good for dwarves, because also keep in mind the dwarves have a sub-theme going on, and that's vehicle tribal. That was established in Kaldheim and further enforced it was established in Kaladesh and further enforced in Kaldheim. So the first ability is a little bit of an anthem effect, just a +1/+0. Nothing huge, but still significant for dwarves, which, you know, could go wide. And it's also significant because not only is it good for like letting your dwarves hit for more damage, but it also allows them to crew vehicles more efficiently, because, you know, like each vehicle has a crew requirement. If it's like 3 and you have a 2/2 dwarf on the battlefield, you can't crew it. You'd have to tap like 2 dwarves or whatever, 2 creatures to do so. And Magda might make it a lot easier to crew your vehicles efficiently in that regard. Then number 2, whenever a dwarf you control becomes tapped, you create a treasure token. This is a fantastic source of ramp. If you have a bunch of dwarves, you know, you tap 5 of your dwarves, either attack or crew vehicles or tap for whatever other reason on a turn, you generated 5 mana, and that's insane for, again, a 2 mana creature. And then finally, if you have 5 treasure tokens, you can just sacrifice them at instant speed whenever you want. No additional mana cost or whatever to activate this ability. Just 5 treasure tokens, easy peasy. You search your library for any artifact or dragon card, and you put that card onto the battlefield, which is absolutely insane. It doesn't matter the CMC of this artifact or dragon card. You could put the Dragon onto the battlefield if it was in your 99. You could put a Blightsteel Colossus, you know, onto the battlefield if it's in your 99. So that is bonkers. And the fact that you have all 3 of these abilities on a 2 mana creature is absolutely disgusting. The only thing that, like, the major restriction here is that it's all tied toward dwarves. And dwarves are like a pretty small tribe. They got the short end of the stick in terms of like card pool and stuff. So yeah, she's clearly a pushed commander for dwarf tribal, and she's trying to like carry dwarves on her shoulders. And I think she does a good job of it. But what do you think, Seth?
So yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that this is the new best dwarf commander. I also think that if you're playing like Tabal, easy inclusion in the 99, like, it's going to be great in the 99, in other dwarf style decks if you want to go into Boros. But really, for me, I don't even know if the dwarf text is all that important. Like, I am mostly excited about the treasure text. I think that is the scariest part of this card. Like, obviously, if you're playing dwarves, it's even better, but there's a lot of ways to make treasures. And if you can get to 5 treasures, it's great. If you can get to 10 treasures, it seems really easy to be like, oh, sack 5, get Blightsteel. Oh, sack 5, get Lightning Greaves, kill you with Blightsteel, or something along those lines. And getting to 10 treasures doesn't seem like that much of a stretch to me with cards like Brass's Bounty, all the like random make a treasure, draw a couple cards type spells that exist in the format. So the thing I like about this is it's a great commander for a really janky tribe, and it might make that janky tribe good. And it's also just like a really powerful commander without that janky tribe if you want to focus on the treasure theme. And I'm not 100% convinced that I would not just play this as a ramp spell, like in my 99. Like, if you can play this in a mono red deck on turn 2, odds are you're going to be able to hit someone the first couple of turns, hit who was ever open to get treasures, and then throw a couple vehicles or other ways to tap your creatures without attacking. And if this is +1 treasure every turn, just as like this weird ramp spell, even that's really good, discounting all the rest of the synergies just to have an extra mana each turn.
Yeah, by herself, she enables everything you want. Like the last two abilities are the best. And yeah, Magda is a dwarf, so you can just use her as like a 2-mana ramp spell that also, grabs your Blightsteals and whatnot.
Also Maskwood Nexus.
Oh yeah,
Maskwood Nexus. All your creatures are dwarves.
Your Maskwood Nexus.
It can find your Maskwood Nexus. Yeah. It turns all your creatures into dwarves, so any of your creatures that tapped are going to make treasures, and then it also makes all the creatures in your deck into dragons, so you can tutor out any creatures with the last ability as well. So I think that's another really sweet synergy.
Yeah, I personally am most excited for her in my tribal deck. I'm a broken record here because Kaldheim is all about that. But yeah, she's like an auto include in my tribal deck. She's gonna grab, I think her last ability. I don't have Blightsteel Colossus in the deck, but I have like Hellkite Courser. So I can grab like Hellkite Courser, which will immediately put my commander onto the battlefield, which is the Dragon. And then the Dragon immediately swings for 10 and a whole bunch of stuff. So I love her already there. And I like her as a commander, but like you said, you don't necessarily need to build Dwarf Tribal around her. She just can be like a consistent 2-mana ramp spell in your deck that has extra bonuses with treasure tokens that you build a treasure deck around it. I also really like her as part of the 99 of Depala Pilot Exemplar, because Depala is all about vehicles and dwarves. You have a bigger card pool because you're in Boros instead of just red. And you can utilize all of her abilities a little bit better in that. But also Magda just as the commander is great too.
Let's move on. Number 2 on my list. We are sticking in the world of gods. We have a Seca, God of the Tree, and also another pretty relevant backside on this god, the Prismatic Bridge. And this is a card that I don't know if you've seen it on Twitter, Tomer. People have already been complaining about this card and asking for it to be banned in Brawl because the Prismatic Bridge side apparently is kind of dominating the format, where you just fill your deck with really big scary things and play that and then spin into the only creatures in your deck, and it's like the new best thing in the format. But this is another card that I think I guess I'm excited about it for 2 reasons. One is I think it's a cool leader for God Tribal. Like if you want to play God Tribal, yes, you play like Corona the False God is kind of funny, but this, I think, you can play Morophon, I guess, would also be another good option. But this has a relevant ability for your gods with the front half, where you can add mana and make all your other stuff add mana. So you can fix your mana, ramp into your gods, and then the backside is just going to start dropping gods into play every turn, essentially, for free.
Yeah.
And if you want to build it spiky, you can go like Oath of Druids, or kind of, I guess, like Brawl players are playing it, where if you make sure that the only creatures or planeswalkers in your deck are massive haymakers like Crater Hoofs and Eldrazi, if that's all you have in your deck, then the Prismatic Bridge half is like kill on sight before you untap, or you're going to be getting something ridiculous for free and probably taking over the game. So you can also build it as like a pretty spiky, bomb heavy 5-color style deck around the backside with an enchantment as your commander, with a Seca just being kind of like whatever. Like that's just there so you can have it in your command zone and be allowed to have the Prismatic Bridge in your command zone. But Tomer, what do you think about this one?
I totally agree with that. I feel like the backside is a lot more interesting as a commander, or even part of the 99, than the front side here. I like the idea of just like filling your deck full of like big hitters that you'll never whiff if you build it correctly and you just have big haymakers. I also like her as like the leader of 5-color Super Friends. There aren't a lot of like great 5-color options for Super Friends. I guess Golos, but Golos is so boring.
Yeah.
But this one is like, if you just have a deck full of Planeswalkers, it doesn't really matter which Planeswalker you hit. Like each one is going to be sweet value. And there's other ways to like get even more value out of the ability. You can get more triggers by using stuff like Strionic Resonator and Live the Form Engine, or to copy those triggers, or you can take an extra upkeep with Paradox Saves. So you can find more ways to get extra value out of this big enchantment. And it's also enchantment, not a creature, so it's a little bit harder for decks to deal with it when it's on the battlefield. So it has a little bit more resilience to removal. And also the Seca side, it's good for like legendary creature tribal, which I personally, I'm more interested in having like a Sisse as my commander for 5 color for that. But she's probably solid still in the 99 of a Sisse deck. And even as a commander, she's still quite good. You know, she does the whole like aggravated assault, infinite combo stuff. But she's just solid all overall. But yeah, the bridge side is definitely more exciting to me.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think that's one of the, I think overall out of Kaldheim, one of the biggest wins is getting these non-creatures in the command zones. I think that's my favorite part of how they did MDFCs, because that's just something brand new that we haven't seen. You've always had to have a legendary creature as your commander, and then Wizards found a way to kind of like skirt that rule a little bit and give you like vehicle commanders and enchantment commanders and planeswalker commanders and so forth, which I just think that's really cool, and it's going to open up things we've never seen before in Commander, and what I hope is a really positive and like diverse way where we're going to see a bunch of new things we've just never seen before.
Yeah, Wizards was very inelegant about it in the past, where they had like a planeswalker and they'll be like, this planeswalker can be your commander. And it's like, yeah, I mean, that works, but it's not a beautiful design from a design perspective. It's like this little added text, but this actually works. It's like perfect. So I like it.
Well, let's keep moving on. We have number 2 on Tomer's list, Mystic Reflection, and this is a card that it's super unique. One of the, just another really unique card, but Tomer, I haven't exactly figured out what to do with this one yet. What are you doing with Mystic Reflection in Commander?
So I think Mystic Reflection is my pick for the most powerful Commander card from the set. It's a very cheap instant, and what it does is it lets you either have your creatures enter the battlefield as the most powerful creature on the battlefield, or even more nefarious, you could turn your opponent's very threatening creature that's about to come onto the battlefield into the least interesting, like a 1/1 soldier token, for example. So what do you want to do with Mystic Reflection? Yes, see, is if you are in a token deck or any sort of deck, really, I would run this in any blue deck. You run it in any sort of blue deck, and let's say you have I don't know, like increasing ambition or something that makes like 5 tokens on the battlefield immediately. You pay 2 mana or 1 mana if you foretold it. You pay 1 mana and you choose like an Eternal Witness on the battlefield. Then you make your 5 tokens, 5 Eternal Witness triggers now go on the stack. You get 5 cards back. Absolutely insane value immediately. Oh, you got back your Mystic Reflection as one of them, obviously. Or you could do something like you have the Locust God on the battlefield and a Laboratory Maniac or any variant of Laboratory Maniac. And you have a Muldrifter, or there's a Muldrifter on the battlefield as well. So you use Mystic Reflection to copy the Muldrifter, and then you draw a card with Locust God, and an insect token enters the battlefield, and it becomes a copy of the Muldrifter, so you draw 2 cards. Locust God says whenever you draw a card, you make tokens, so you make 2 more tokens, 2 more Muldrifters, you draw your entire deck, and you win with like an Oracle effect, a Laboratory Maniac effect. Or you like have a Master of Tides, I think Master of Waves, that's the one. When Master of Waves enters the battlefield, you make like X amount of elemental horsey thingies equal to your devotion to blue. So when it enters the battlefield, when it's entered the battlefield triggers on the stack, you copy it with the Mystic Reflection, and then you make like, you just make an army of Master of Waves, which make like thousands of Master of Waves, which are all just like elementals that have been turned into Master of Waves, and you have like a stupid amount of power on the battlefield, and you'll win that way. But then also just like very easily, like, oh, you're up against an opponent who has their deck entirely based on their commander, like Orvar, for example, or whatever. And this is like a dime a dozen these days. Most commanders, I would say, most decks are built around the commanders. So it's entering the battlefield, and there's like a 1/1 soldier token or a squirrel on the battlefield, and you're like, that's a cool commander you have. Would be a shame if it entered the battlefield as a 1/1 squirrel token, and then they're stuck with a squirrel token, and then they have to kill their squirrel token just so they can recast their commander afterwards. So it's even worse than just like killing it, because they can't just recast it immediately. They have to find a creative way to murder their own commander before they can actually utilize their commander again. So this card is absolute bananas.
Yeah, like it's almost a weird counter spell for creatures. It's like kind of like this weird essence scatter where yes, you are still giving your opponent something, but if you're turning their commander into a 1/1 token or something with a broken ETB trigger into a 1/1 token, like that's still a huge win. And then all the shenanigans that you can do with it with token production. Like I think the Master of Waveland, or you can go even like memeier and like Springjack Shepherd has another like ETB, make a bunch of tokens, and all those tokens are Springjack Shepherds, which make more tokens, and you just like make a million goats and try to do something like that. So I think this card is really fun. Is this something that you just essentially slot into every blue deck as like a counter / removal spell, Tomer, even if you don't have like those token build arounds or those synergies we were talking about? Is it good enough just to be a blue staple in essentially any deck?
I think so. I am trying to think of scenarios where this card's going to just be dead in my hand. I can't think of any because, like, worst case, I'm just ruining somebody's commander with it for 2 mana or 1 mana.
And
right?
It'll never be dead in your hand because you can always foretell it. It might be dead in the exile zone sometimes.
It's not even dead in the hand. It's in the exile zone. Perfect. I also just want to live the dream of running this in a Dimir deck with Phage in it. So like I have Phage on the battlefield and you cast your commander and then boom, it comes in as Phage and you just die.
Oh, that does sound. Yeah, I think
that would be spice.
I think I saw Vince was today when we were recording this today streaming a leveler deck built around this card, trying to like get down leveler, but then make your opponent copy it with their thing and make them lose to exiling their whole deck. So there definitely are some funny shenanigans that you could do by making your opponent like get a copy of a really negative creature entering the battlefield. But
yeah, a Torpor dot deck would love this.
Let's move on. Number 1 on our list, and ooh. I mean, I just can't resist. Tur Grid got a fright. Also, Tur Grid's Lantern. That's my number 1 card.
I thought better of you, Seth. I thought.
I know. So this isn't a sleeper pick by any means. Everyone has been talking about Tur Grid. Everyone knows this card is good. But I actually really like this card. I do have a bit of a fear that it might be too good and might end up being unfun in Commander. We'll have to wait and see. But this is a commander that does something pretty unique. It's like a mono black sacrifice / wheel commander. And this is a card that I'm sure there's actually going to play it in the 99, but I'm mostly thinking of it as a build around commander effect where you can just do absurd things if you untap with this card. Like the front half Tur Grid, whenever your opponents sacrifice or discard a non-token permanent, you gain control of them essentially. So what this means is you play Tur Grid and then you like Death Cloud, for example, and the end result is going to be all of your opponents have no hands and no battlefield, but not only that, you are going to get all of their permanents from the battlefield and from their hands. It works with just other random. You can build it nicer, even just like Fleshbag Marauder, making everyone sack a creature, and then you gain control of all 3 of those. Like that's the friendly version where you're not leaving your opponent with no lands on the battlefield. So, and then I think the backside is something people sleep on. It's because it's a I win with infinite mana card. Like, if you make infinite mana, you can untap it. You just keep activating it until eventually your opponents have to take the 3 loss of life because they have nothing else to discard or sacrifice. So it's infinite damage if you have infinite mana, essentially, with the back half. So that's 2 very relevant abilities, I think. The back half has applications. The front half, really exciting, build around commander. Tomer, what do you think about this one?
I totally agree with you, but I think it's going to be saltier than perhaps you anticipate. But it is interesting. Like this is definitely the most hyped card. I would say most hyped card from the entire set. I recently posted like a thing on the community tab on the Commander YouTube asking what people want me to play on stream, and Tur Grid is the highest pick. So either people are just like really excited to build her and have her in their own play groups, or, and this is what I'm thinking, is maybe people don't want to actually have Tur Grid in their play group, but they still want to see her be played because, you know, it's a very interesting and powerful commander. So they want to see like, they want to live vicariously through the suffering of others, and see like on Commander Clash and on stream and stuff, so they don't have to be on the receiving end of this highly salty card. And don't worry, friends, if you are interested in seeing it, first episode of Commander Clash will feature it by none other than me. Yes, I am running it. Krim was trying to snap pick Tur Grid, as he usually does. He goes for the troll cards, and I was like, no. If we are showing Tur Grid on Commander Clash, then let it be me, so the Krim can actually be on the receiving end of this very troll card. And like you said, it's incredibly powerful, really powerful with like Death Cloud, Smallpox, Pox, Dark Deal. I wouldn't know off the top of it. It's not like I had the deck ready and ready for the Commander Clash episode or something like that. But suffice to say that she's incredibly powerful as a commander, but I think she's even more sneaky powerful as part of the 99 of, let's say, like a wheel deck, like Nikasaur the Mind Razor, because she will generate so much salt and so much fear the moment you reveal her on the command zone. I think it's actually stronger to have her as part of the 99 so that your opponents don't even know what's coming. Like, it's a nice little, it's a surprise. They can't like hate you out of the game right off the bat because they don't know the Tur Grid's just lurking in the 99 for just waiting in the shadows. I
very much am afraid, and I think I dislike how many super annoying wheel payoffs there are now. Like, when it was just Notion Thief, okay, maybe they won't always draw. But then you got Notion Thief, then you got Narset, and you're like, oh no, it's becoming consistent. And now it's Hull Breacher, and now it's Tur Grid. So you have 4 of these, like, I win, essentially, wheel cards that you can play, which means they're going to show up pretty frequently. I've been trying to sell the Commander Clash crew on a Tur Grid week for our next week when we all play the same commander, so I think that would be absolutely miserable and hilarious. So if you want to see that, let us know in the comments. And my one concern, I think this card's great, and I'm excited to see it in action, but I do have a little fear that it's going to be massively unfun for the table, and that you're going to have people who spend a bunch of money to build Tur Grid because it's so hyped and it is really unique and it's probably fun in small doses. But then after they build the deck and play it with their play group a couple times, the rest of the group is going to be like, come on, dude, like you cannot keep doing this. Like, please build a different deck, or you just get hated out immediately and your arch enemy as soon as you reveal who your commander is. So keep that in mind if you're thinking about investing in the deck, that this is probably going to be one of the saltiest commanders, and I don't know if your play group is going to want to face it every single week, or they're gonna crim you out of the game immediately, like we tend to do on Commander Clash when Crim plays Broken Wheel commanders.
Yeah. Personally speaking, I would not want to play against Tur Grid multiple times. 1 is fine, maybe 2 times is fine, but if like somebody had like their only deck was Tur Grid, for example, like they're coming every Friday Night Magic, you know, they're just showing up with Tur Grid. It's like, I mean, I'll play with them. They're chill people, but like, gosh, no, stop. Just play something that, So, but like some playgroups are going to be totally fine with it. So always check with your playgroup if they're cool with this type of deck. Also, even if your playgroup is cool with them, with Tur Grid, likely they're going to be just killing you on site, killing Tur Grid on site, because the moment Tur Grid's on the battlefield and then you resolve a Pox or like any number of these incredibly powerful cards, you're probably going to be in a game-winning position. So it's like strategically correct to make sure that Tur Grid is never allowed on the battlefield and probably just kill you to make sure that never happens. So you have to have a good mindset about it, right? You have to have the Crim mindset where like, don't take it personally. You're running a very troll card. It's very powerful if it resolves. It has to get removed. So you have to have that right mindset, and your playgroup has to be okay with having to deal with a Tur Grid on the battlefield, right? So keep in mind.
Well, yeah. Let's move on to Tomer's number 1 card. And this one,
surprise.
This one's a little bit friendlier, I would say, than Tur Grid. Maybe. That is Maskwood Nexus. Tomer just cannot get enough of tribal cards with this set. Tomer, Maskwood Nexus was also on my list, but it was at the top of your list. So what are you doing with this one? Outside of tribal, obviously.
So I clearly have a type, and that type is Changeling. And it turns all your creatures in your deck, in your hand, on the battlefield into Changelings, essentially. They're all creature types at all times. This is kind of very similar to Arcane Adaptation, but it's even better. Because, brain, Because all creature types at all time. Why did I take a break? My brain just died because it was so awesome.
You need more coffee.
It's better than, it's like Arcane Adaptation, which is 3 mana. You choose a creature type, and then all creatures in your hand and on the battlefield, in the library, they're all that specific chosen type in addition to the other types. So that's really useful to help in a tribal deck or any sort of tribe deck. This one though takes it to the next level where they're all creature types at all times. They're all changelings. It's all insane. So they're all gods. They're all ninjas. They're all elves. They're all everything you could possibly need. This is the best new card for tribal. This is like the linchpin of tribal. Because sure, you have a bunch of changelings in your deck that are all creature types at all times. They don't need this Nexus to turn into all those types. But you also have a bunch of these tribal payoff cards. Like you can have Yuriko, the Tiger's Shadow, that says whenever a ninja you control deals combat damage, then you draw cards and your opponent's lose lives. But she herself is not a changeling. She is just a ninja. So if you wipe the board of all non-dragon creatures with like Crux of Fate, she's going to die. So Masquerade Nexus is not necessarily going to help your changeling cards. It's going to help all your support cards synergize with each other, which is kind of insane. It's very, very good. And also it has an activate ability. If you have extra mana, you can pay 3 mana and make a changeling out of it. That's not as relevant. Hopefully you have better things to do with your mana than pay 3 to make a changeling. But I mean, Seth like pays 5 mana to make a clue token and sacrifice it to draw a card. So I guess it really depends on what you're feeling. I
don't think you play it to make the shapeshifter token, but I think there will be games when you just literally have nothing else going on, and making a 2/2 is better than wasting your mana, so why not? I think the other thing I love about this card, and another big upside, is the only effects we have to let you fully control creature types have been Arcane Adaptation and like Conspiracy, which are blue and black. This being colorless opens up additional possibilities because you can play in any deck, and there's just lots of really funny janky things you can do with it. Like you're playing a mono black deck and you're playing Liliana's Contract as a card draw spell, because draw 4 for 5 is like decent. You play this, if you have 4 creatures, they're going to be demons with different names. You just like accidentally win the game. Or you can we talked about Magda earlier. There's the Druid Lord that lets you tap druids to steal all of someone's lands. Like any creatures on the battlefield will be druids. People have been talking about like Deathbell Warcry that lets you tutor up 4 Minotaurs from your library and put them directly into play. If you have this out, you get any 4 creatures. So the shenanigans this enables, I mean, are they going to be broken? Probably not, because a lot of them depend on having this on the battlefield, and if you don't have it, you're going to have a kind of clunky deck, but they're going to be really hilarious when they actually come together. And again, it's stuff that we just didn't have the possibility to do before because of color restrictions in Commander. So all of a sudden your mono red deck has this, or your mono green deck has this, which is something that just didn't exist before. So this is also one of my favorite cards, and a card that probably show up in a decent amount of decks just because of the hilarious shenanigans it can pull off.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it, where this allows you to pull off decks that require non-tribal cards to work well together, and enables like some game-winning combos or really cool synergies or something like that. I noticed a lot of feedback on this card where people are like, "Oh, this makes this makes regular tribal decks that much better. It's an auto-include in like any tribal deck," and I would disagree with that. Like, if you have a cleric deck or an elf deck or like most tribe decks, chances are most of the creatures in your deck are already that tribe type. Like if you have a cleric deck, chances are most of your cards are already clerics, so you're not going to get that much value out of the Nexus. There might be some non-cleric decks in the deck, but if you only have like a handful of them, it's generally not going to be that worth it to turn them into clerics just for the sake of additional synergies. However, if you have a idea in mind where you need these tribal synergies to work together, and you need non-tribal cards to work with that specific tribe, like you said with Magda or similar cards, then Nexus is now enabling those crazy things like the Minotaur, for example. So that's where it's going to be really good in. Tribal, I think it's also going to be very good in. If you have a lot of non-tribal cards in your deck that need to be there to turn into tribal cards to work better with your whatever you're doing, like the Malcolm and Breaches combo deck that I did, then it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's actually actively bad in straight up tribal decks. Like playing this in elves or merfolk or something, I don't see the point for exactly the reason you said. Although I do also like that it opens up dual tribal decks. We have like, oh man, I never remember the name of these cards, but there's like that conspiracy partner pair that cares about angels and dragons, I want to say.
Yeah.
Something like this to make all of your creatures both angels and dragons. In a deck like that, where you're trying to like meld together two different tribes for some sort of payoff, this is kind of the glue that can hold a deck like that together. So even though I don't like it in straight up tribal decks, I think there are tons of possibilities for this card in Commander.
Lynn Civi, Defined Hero, finally gets the card it needed to become amazing. You can use it's a repeatable tutor engine for rebels. There's like no rebels. It's mono white. It needs all the help it can get. So you run all the good rebels, and then you have Max with Nexus. Probably find ways to tutor it up in white. There's a couple ways, I guess. And boom, then now you can tutor up anything, any creature in your deck. That's cool.
And it's to really wrap back around to where we started a half hour ago, it's the World Tree combo piece. You play this, you activate World Tree, you get all your creatures from your deck, which is pretty sweet as well. So on that note, I think that brings us to the end of our top 10/personal top 5 Commander cards from Kaldheim. Tomer, anything else on the way out the door today?
I don't like Snow Tribal.
Really?
I like Snow Tribal. I don't like Snow Basics. Snow Basics were a design mistake. I don't care. I don't care if it's interesting for draft. I don't care. I wish it wasn't back, but at least the cards in Kaldheim were subdued, you know? Most of them aren't egregious, so I don't feel obligated to turn all my decks into Snow Basic lands, but stop messing with no strictly better basic lands. And I don't care. In the viewer comments, somebody's tapping away. Actually, it's not actually better because if you run a bunch of sideboard hate cards in Commander that hurt Snow Basic, then it's worse, actually. Nobody runs those cards. You don't run those cards in Commander. That's not a valid argument.
So someone might thermo cross you and they'll gain 1 life along with blowing up their land because it's a snow land. Oh no.
Oh no, there's a card that will like melt my snow land so they'll be regular lands. Oh, boo-hoo. Nobody runs them. Stop.
I agree. But I will say I also agree that considering the downsides of Snowlands that I see, I do think Wizards handled it fairly well, where there weren't a lot of like staple snow cards, but there were sweet snow cards to build an actual snow deck. And if you're playing an actual snow deck, then I'm on board with you playing Snow Basics. Like if you want to play Jorn and like the 1-drop that draws cards and so forth, like there's cool cards if you're Snow Tribal, but there weren't a lot of snow cards that I think I would just run in a generic deck for the most part, which means you do get around that problem of strictly better basics for the most part. Although the more we keep going down this path we had Modern Horizons and now Kaldheim, like it's a problem that keeps increasing. The more and more snow cards exist without any real punishment for them. So we dodged the bullet this time maybe, but we might not next time.
Yeah, I totally agree. I like Jorn too. I will build a Jorn deck. I'm very excited for Snow Tribal. Snow Basics are what I don't like. If you eroded Snow Basics so they enter tapped or something, no problem with Snow Tribal at all whatsoever. Just Snow Basics, that in particular, I do not like. I think it was a mistake. You gotta stop it. Just stop it. I don't know. On a good note, the rest of the Kaldheim's good. I like it.
On that note, I think that brings us to the end of our top 10 Kaldheim cards for Commander. So Tomer, thanks for hanging out. I always look forward to these videos.
Thanks for having me. I love these.
And thanks everyone for watching. You've seen our top 5/top 10 cards for Kaldheim. What do you like? Let us know in the comments. What are you most excited to play, brew around? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Also, Commander Clash should be back a week from now, starting with Kaldheim stuff, Friday, February 5th, I believe it is. So keep an eye out for that coming. Was that the right date, Tomer? Did I just mess that up brutally? Is it actually?
It's going to be in a couple days.
Okay. Friday, it is the 5th. Okay.
Days.
So yeah, it's coming out Friday the 5th. So keep an eye out for that in a couple of days with a bunch of sweet new Kaldheim cards leading the way. So thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye.
Oh, I mean, that was
Awesome.
basically a half hour.
Yeah, it was close enough. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, help us out by clicking the like button down below. And to keep up with the latest and greatest, make sure to click the subscribe button. And if you want to watch similar videos, click on the links appearing on screen right now.